Holy friendships are not a luxury item. Holy friendships are a necessity to our sustainability and flourishing.
I'm Mitch.
And I'm Missy.
We're coworkers.
He's the boss, and we're married.
And she's the boss. Together, we host Good Faith Weekly, a podcast on faith and culture.
What could possibly go wrong?
Tune in and find out. Missy. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up. Then later on in the pod, we're going to sit down with Reverend Dr. Victoria Axon White, who's got a brand new book out entitled Holy Friendships, Nurturing Relationships That Sustain Pastors and Leaders. It's going to be a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hey, we got to start out the pod with me giving you some props because you had an incredible accomplishment this week. I was so proud of you.
Oh.
That's right.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Do you want to tell the audience what you did?
You guys, big news in the Randall house this week. I got the Wordle in one guess.
Woohoo! Wow, I am so proud.
Are you not? I mean, that tells you how low the bar is set around here for my daily accomplishments.
I mean, you were so excited about it. You actually posted about it on social media, on Facebook.
I never do that, but I did. So
yeah,
I was, and you know what? People were rightfully surprised and encouraging of that accomplishment. So
yeah, I think some people were calling BS on it.
That? Yeah. It totally wasn't. It was such a lucky guess that it was correct. So
I mean, how did you come up with that word? Was that on your mind that day?
I have the same starting word every single day.
Of course you do.
So after 330 times,
You're such a creature of habit.
I am such a creature of habit.
My question is, since you've used that word and it was the correct word for that wordle, are you still using it?
Yes. I know, that's so stupid. I should change it. But see,
You'll never get it again.
I go by the Wheel of Fortune rule. Like, you have your most common letters, your R, S, T, L, and E, right? That was what everybody does in the whatever the bonus round is at the end. So I try to use a word that uses those letters. And that's how I come up with my starting word. I do. You're right. I need to change my starting word. I'm going to work on that.
It's so funny. Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
That was a big accomplishment. You do know that I have never played a game of Wordle in my life.
It's not so much suited for those who are spelling challenged.
Because, I mean, anybody can spell a word correctly. It takes real genius to spell it the way I do.
You keep telling yourself that there, bud. So this week we had International Women's Day.
Yay.
And this month is Women's History Month.
Absolutely.
So you'll be glad to know I've come to the pod tonight prepared with some materials.
Oh, boy.
So we're going to have a sort of little quiz, but also some fun facts.
Are you going to make me look stupid?
I mean... Only if you don't know anything about women.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen.
So,
here we go.
So if women speak 20,000 words a day, how many words do you think men speak?
So really, that's
on average.
A study they do.
Yes.
They use 20,000 words.
Yeah, 20,000 words a day.
Oh, I would say half of that, 10,000.
7,000 words a day.
Pretty close.
Yeah, so that checks out. That makes sense. This is a fun fact. You don't have to answer this. The average amount of time a woman can keep a secret is 47 hours and 15 minutes.
That seems long.
It does, right? But the funny thing
because, I mean, like when you get a secret, as soon as you walk in the door, I can just tell on your face, you got some good juice.
It's real hard to keep secrets. My sister can keep a secret better than anybody's business.
Oh,
She's
sure.
been like that since she was a toddler, and it drives me nuts. I am not that person. So anyways, okay. Women spend nearly 1 year of their lives deciding what to wear.
Really?
Yeah. 1 year of their lives.
I spend probably about day and a half deciding what I want to wear.
I know. Mine would probably be double that given the amount of time that we spend traveling and I have to pack a suitcase.
True, that's
because
very
then
true.
that just it's doubly hard at that point. So on average, a woman eats 4 pounds of lipstick in her lifetime. Did you know this?
No, I had no idea.
I do not, because I do not wear lipstick, but I just thought that was super random.
Very interesting.
Let's see. Let's do a question. The first superhero film starring a female lead to be directed by a female was what?
Oh my goodness. A female lead directed by a female.
A superhero film.
A superhero film.
You're going to be real disappointed in yourself if you don't get this.
Wonder Woman?
Yes.
Yay!
2017. First superhero film starring a female lead and directed by a woman.
Love Wonder Woman. You know, of course, you do know I couldn't play Wonder Woman now in like states like Tennessee.
Right. That's illegal. I've got to
illegal.
take away your wristbands and your cape that I ordered you a few
And
months
my
ago.
lasso.
Oh, and the lasso. Well, you got grounded from that for other reasons. But
And my high heel boots. I mean, I had the whole thing. I had the whole outfit. It was great.
Did you know that women see 20% more color than men?
Really?
They do.
Even you?
That is so, no, if you think about it, this is so true. How many times have we had a huge argument about what color something is?
It's blue.
Oh my gosh. There's this thing called periwinkle or mauve versus pink or all of the things that we...
It's pink.
Oh my gosh. See? Proof's in the pudding. And oddly enough, while they see 20% more color than men, they earn 20% less than men.
Oh, boo.
Women still earn around 80 cents on the dollar that men do.
Shameful.
And the 2 highest IQ scores in recorded history belong to, you guessed it, women.
I would concur with that.
Okay. So let's go
I've
on.
always said that you're the brains in this partnership.
Sure. Now this one you should know.
I just got the good looks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What year did women gain the right to vote?
Oh, I should know this.
You should. You're going to be embarrassed.
I am so embarrassed. 1922.
Nope. 20. You're
1920.
close. 1920.
Okay, 1920.
And today, related, women currently hold 17% of congressional and Senate seats and 18% of gubernatorial positions in the United States. So
Still, one of my favorite quotes of all
Progress.
time was by the notorious RGB when she was asked, "When will enough justices? When will there be enough women justices in the world?" And she says, 9, because
And there are
that.
9.
I mean, how long has the court been dominated by men? So, shout out to RGB.
But
Rest in peace.
slight correction, RBG.
RBG. Thank
I know
you.
it doesn't roll off the tongue
It
as
doesn't,
well,
yeah,
so
RBG.
we always get that wrong. Okay, and sort of related, 14% of active members in the U.S. armed forces today are women. So women make up 14% of our armed forces today, but in 1950, they were less than 2%.
Wow.
So we are making some progress in these areas, but it needs to be more. While over 60% of college degrees awarded in the U.S. are earned by women.
Good.
So here are some specific women I wanted to highlight that I found as I was studying long and hard for our opening tonight. Do you know who the first woman to play professional baseball was?
No.
Vern Jackie Mitchell was a pitcher. She played professional baseball.
Awesome.
While women don't have much of a presence in baseball today, Mitchell proved it wasn't because they couldn't play. During an exhibition game, she struck out both Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
Good night, really.
know.
Hey, did I ever tell you? I mean, I was a pretty good athlete growing up.
Were you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't bad. And I had this friend, and she was a girl. She wasn't my girlfriend, but she was a friend that was a girl. And she was a great athlete. She played tennis. And I played baseball, football, and I was, kind of showing off and stuff like that. So I was bragging one day, and I said, let's take it to the court. And so she takes me to her tennis court, and we play a match. I don't know, is that what you call it? A tennis match.
I think so.
Yeah. She smoked me.
Oh,
I mean, I couldn't
not at all
return her
surprised.
serve. I mean, she just smoked me. It was so funny.
Coincidentally, the baseball commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, banned women from the sport about a year later.
Well, of course he
After
did.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So they couldn't play that because clearly they couldn't keep
He also kicked out Shoeless Joe Jackson and the notorious 1919 White Sox.
Okay, we're not talking about the men right now.
Sorry.
Okay, here's another interesting story. You may know this one. Upon her husband's death, Cherokee leader Nancy Ward took his place in a 1775 battle against the Creeks, your people, and led the Cherokee to victory. After the victory, she became the head of the Women's Council and a member of the Council of Chiefs, playing a key role in social and political changes to the Cherokee Nation throughout her life.
That's
Had you
amazing.
heard
No, I
that
did not
first
know
story?
that.
Okay,
No, I did not know
that's
that.
very
But
interesting.
I will say this, one of my favorite all-time indigenous leaders was the chief of the Cherokees. And do you remember her name? Because she's got the most awesome name in the
I
world.
don't.
Wilma Mankiller.
Ooh.
I mean, doesn't that strike fear into you? Yeah, Chief Mankiller was awesome. She was great.
That's amazing. Okay, so this is another interesting story I hadn't heard before. In 1777, 16-year-old Sybil Luddington raced through the night to warn New York patriots that the British were attacking in nearby Danbury, Connecticut, where munitions and supplies for the entire region were stored during the heat of the Revolutionary War. While Paul Revere gets all the glory for the nighttime rides, her journey took twice the distance and helped the troops prepare and repel a British attack.
There is so much to say about that.
Right? I felt like we could have camped out
Exactly.
on that story for a while, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are some others I want
Checks
to get
out,
to. But
basically.
yeah,
Checks out.
16-year-old rode twice the distance of Paul Revere,
Yep.
and got
Nothing.
nothing. Okay, so this is fun. The first person to make the daring attempt, mind you, to go over Niagara Falls in a wooden barrel was a woman. This is where I question the whole intelligence thing. On October 24th, 1901,
She's probably trying to get away from her husband.
Annie Edson Taylor, a 43-year-old school teacher who should have known better, from Michigan, plunged over the falls. She survived with only a small gash on her head, but swore to never take that on again. I mean,
Smart woman.
makes sense. And so my last person we're going to highlight in honor of Women's History Month is Mary Anderson, because she invented one of my favorite things ever in 1903. She was granted a patent for, any idea what it might be?
No clue.
The windshield wiper.
Wow, way to go. That's awesome.
It would become standard equipment on cars by 1916. She isn't alone in her inventiveness. Women have also invented such things as industrial lathes. Do you know what this is?
Mm-hmm.
You do? I had to look it up.
Yeah.
It's a machinery that shapes metal.
Well, it spins and then you shape it, yeah.
Okay, so women invented that. Women invented whiteout, bras, obviously, non-reflective glass, the dishwasher, disposable diapers, both of those for probably very obvious reasons, petroleum refining methods, and much, much more.
Well, that's awesome. Well,
So
those were
there
great.
you
Those are
go.
fun facts.
I brought homework today.
That was amazing.
Brought my research. So yeah.
Well, to all the female listeners out there, remarkable women, thank you so much for listening to Good Faith Weekly each week. We appreciate you. Happy International Women's Day. We really revere you. And Missy, happy International Women's Day. It's
Women's History Month.
History Month.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks. Appreciate that.
yeah, hope you have a good week or a good month.
Right. It's all month. It's about me.
All month.
All month.
Oh, it's always about you. All right, stay tuned as Missy and I sit down with Reverend Dr. Victoria Atkinson White as we talk about her brand new book, Holy Friendships, Nurturing Relationships That Sustain Pastors and Leaders. Hey, Good Faith Weekly listeners, we've got an incredible opportunity coming up April 25th through 26th of this year. The Birmingham Montgomery Civil Rights Good Faith Experience is right around the corner. Join Starlett Thomas, Bruce Gorley, Missy Randall, and myself as we retrace the steps of those who made history and nurture a faith that moves us all forward. For more information, go to goodfaithmedia.org and click on Experiences. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Reverend Dr. Victoria Atkinson White is a writer, pastor, designer, going to ask you about that later, coach, facilitator, and teacher. She combines her gifts most effectively through her work at Leadership Education at Duke Divinity, where she cultivates and supports innovative Christian leaders and their institution. Her new book, Holy Friendships, Nurturing Relationships That Sustain Pastors and Leaders, will be available next Tuesday, March 14th, Pi Day, wherever you purchase your reading materials. Victoria, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you. It is a joy to be here with you.
Well, we are so glad that you have joined us. Now, before we jump into the book, I've got to ask you about that designer tag on your bio. What do you design?
Going back to my dissertation at Duke Divinity School, I studied design thinking, which really is the wheelhouse of the church, because design thinking is all about person-centered design. And that is exactly what we should be doing in Christian ministry, is designing our work around the people that we serve. And so I call myself a designer because part of the work that I believe that I am called to do is to design, to choreograph, to create events and atmospheres in which people can come together and be their truest selves.
Well, I love that. And that was a lot more important than what I was thinking. I thought I was going to get a new bow tie out of it. But
I was thinking I was going to get some decorating help. But I suppose that's
important too, Victoria.
It's all about presentation.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the new book. That's very exciting. Comes out next Tuesday.
I'm going to start by asking you to define holy friendships for us. Tell us what that is and also what it is not.
Sure. Holy friendships are mutual and sacred relationships deeply formed in God's love. There's a couple of key words in that. Mutual, meaning that two people come together in a friendship that is intentional. If you and I are holy friends, we know that we have a particular kind of relationship, and we talk about it. A number of times I'll have folks come to me and say, well, I think I'm in a holy friendship, but I'm maybe not sure. And it's as if they're asking me to validate it. Well, that's not my place to do. But if you're not at a place where you're talking about the intimacy and the importance of your holy friendship, it may mean that you're not in one. With my holy friends, we most definitely talk about the power of our friendship and the need that we have for each other in each other's lives. So mutual, sacred, going back to the Bible, everything that is sacred is holy. It is set apart. It is something different. And so my holy friendships are different from, say, the soccer moms that I meet up with on the sidelines on the weekends, or someone I might see just every once in a while for a casual coffee. This is a set aside special relationship and deeply formed in God's love. This means that the Holy Spirit is wrapped in these relationships with us. It is Holy friendships are a part of our spiritual formation, I believe. So they are deeply formed in the way that God loves us. God loves us, and we love our holy friends. Holy friends, to me, in that mutual relationship, that also means that they're not transactional and they're not hierarchical. So a number of folks will think that their mentor is a holy friend. Well, maybe. However, there tends to be an imbalance in that relationship. The mentor tends to have more power than the mentee. Some people might think that their coach or their spiritual director is a holy friend. Well, maybe, but if you're paying someone to tell you something, that's a transactional relationship. And so for me, holy friendships, the mutuality and the sacredness of those means that they typically are not transactional or hierarchical relationships.
So are you suggesting that these holy friendships are only within the context of faith or your faith community?
most definitely are commonly found within your faith community. However, I have a number of female rabbis and female and male rabbis who are holy friends of mine, and those who are in other faiths. An imam who is particularly close to me. I think that the faith part of it roots us in a telos, a significance in knowing that our lives and our vocations matter to the inbreaking of God's kingdom.
I was going to say, as you were talking, it's just funny that you bring up the soccer moms. We had our youngest son played competitive soccer throughout his childhood. And some of my, what I would consider my most holy and important friendships came from that actual place. So it was just funny you chose that. That's why I wanted to make that clarification is, are you defining this as something strictly within the walls of that place and space, or...
I think it's most definitely about what the two people choose to bring to that relationship. And yes, I grew up in the world of competitive soccer, and so I know what it is like to spend literally every single weekend of every single week of every single year for years on end on the soccer field with the same parents, and you do get very close. I also talk in the book about how holy friendships form. One of the ways that they form, I believe, is through longevity of relationship. When these are the people who know our stories from beginning to end, whether or not they were there in the beginning, they know them because we have told them and we are continually living into them. So the soccer moms you're talking about absolutely would live into that.
You know, one of the things I really enjoyed about the book, and it was kind of an aha moment for me, because for a long time I have talked about the importance of community for Jesus. One of the first things he does before he begins his public ministry is to develop a community. But you did a really nice job framing that community and how it evolved over 3 years, beginning with rabbi, moving to friendship. And I just thought it was a beautiful example about how relationships can evolve using that biblical example for us today. So can you speak a little bit about how Jesus came to those relationships and how they evolved over time?
Absolutely. And this was one of the places where I really struggled, because growing up in Baptist churches, you know, with the felt Sunday school boards and all the figures up there, I was taught that Jesus was good friends with the disciples, that was, he picked his 12 friends to go with him. And yet when I talked about holy friends not being hierarchical, they called him rabbi, which is a term of hierarchy. It is someone that we place above us in religious circles. And so I would be contradicting myself if I said that according to that, holy friends can be rabbi and parishioner. At the same time, if you look at John 15, which is really a critical text for me in terms of holy friendship, there's this beautiful transformation where Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, but friends. Jesus is changing the metaphor of relationship, of that of hierarchy, to one of mutuality. One of the things I think is so important about that John 15 text is how Jesus literally turns that metaphor on its head. Especially growing up in the South, for someone like me, that slave servant master language is so fraught and so electrified. And so for me, it's really good news that that's not the language that Jesus wants to use anymore. Even though I can remember a pastor from when I was itty bitty up there in his big black robe, and it was swishing around. And I remember him saying that God is our master.
Oh, wow.
And I remember even as a child just kind of cringing. Yeah, thinking, oh, wow, have you read our history books?
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that Jesus turns that metaphor on its head and says, that's not what we are anymore. We're friends. We share what we know of each other. We share what we know of the Father. And this is important to us, that we are mutual and that we are together in this. And you see that in Jesus's relationship with Lazarus, showing extreme emotion when Lazarus died, and that Jesus had Mary and Mary Magdalene around them. Jesus loved them, I would say, as holy friends.
Well said.
Victoria, an ongoing theme in the book is your observations and questions coming from your children. For example, they observed how their parents laughed differently with some friends, and then wanted to know the rules when it comes to telling someone you love them.
I love that story. That was a great story.
What have
Isn't
you
that
learned?
great?
What have you learned from your children, and why is it important to listen to their observations and questions?
Just today's a teacher work day. And so my children are home from school and in the other room. And my 13-year-old son got his phone taken away from him for reasons we won't talk about right now.
Oh, man, that could be a whole other podcast, couldn't it?
He doesn't have the ability to text his friends. And so he wanted to play with the neighbors next door. And he said, "Hey, Mom, will you text the mom next door and ask if I can play with the kids?" And I said, "No. Go over there and knock on the door." And he said, "No." What if they say no? That's embarrassing. I grew up. You walk next door and you knock on the door and you ask, "Hey, can so-and-so play?" And if they can, great, you go outside and play. If they can't, then you go to the next kid's house. It's okay. It's totally fine. It's what you do. And I didn't realize until I had kids with cell phones that what we have done is raised a generation of children who are afraid of rejection because they do everything on these little devices where they don't have to make eye contact and they don't have to have face-to-face conversations to figure out what relationships feel like and negotiate that. So that is something that even today I'm living through with my kids. I also have a 16-year-old daughter who is one of the most intuitive and wise souls on the face of the earth. And she teaches me daily about friendship and empathy and selflessness. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is because when I was growing up, friendships, especially with women, were quite fraught. There was a lot of competition among us because there was only so much room at the top, we were told. I hope that the world that my daughter is living into, I hope that the examples that I am giving her of holy friendships, especially those with my female friends, is painting a world for her that is different than the one that I grew up in. Because I wish for both of my children that they will know and have the love of their holy friends, because I believe that it's critical to their flourishing.
So you make the point about friendships among women, which kind of leads into the next question, which is the differences between relationships with the friendships that men have and friendships that women have, and
Yes.
women tending to have more and deeper relationships, and men may have only one or two. Talk about those differences and about what's healthy and what might not be healthy.
That really depends on the person. I am the type of person who I have kind of my core group of holy friends that I text with at least every other day, probably talk to every other day. And that is how I do life. That is where I get my energy. That is where I get my accountability. That's how I figure out who I am in the world. And yet I have a number of good friends who they're perfectly happy having their one person. And that is healthy for them. That is great for them. And they are flourishing in their life and ministry. And so I don't care if you have one, if you have 5, if you have 20. I just want people to have them, because that, I believe, is what's so critical to our flourishing.
One aspect of a holy relationship that you mention in the book is the ability to create safe space. In one scenario, you talk about your relationship with a holy friend. You talk about holding the basket, which I loved, for your friend, then asking your friend for permission and guidance on how to respond about what she put in that basket. So tell us why that safe space is so important, and as well as asking for permission to respond. That was really, really I really enjoyed that and spoke to me.
Yeah, that's a powerful story for me. And my friend Jean, who I talk about in the book, we hold the basket for each other. And, that means one of us holds this metaphorical basket and we just dump whatever it is that's on our minds into that basket, and the other person holds it for us so that our lives are souls feel a bit lighter for a moment because someone else is carrying that basket for us. And so, Mitch, if I was carrying your basket and you were dumping all of your things into it, I am going to hold that basket for you in that moment. At the same time, because we are holy friends, I'm not going to do anything with that basket unless I have your permission and blessing to do so, because that's the stuff in the basket is not mine. It is all yours. And if I take it on, if I take your stuff from the basket on, I'm actually doing you a disservice as a friend because those are your things to work through. And if I do that work for you, that's really not helping you in the long run. And so what the holy friend does is they hold that basket and then say, okay, what would you like to do going forward with this? Is there something that you want to work on? Did you just need for me to hold it? Do you want me to set it down and we can come back to it later? This is one of the differences between holy friends, I believe, and therapists, counselors, spiritual directors, coaches, those kinds of folks, because the folks that we pay a service for can also hold our basket for us. At the same time, we are paying them to help us get to a certain point in our development or in our formation. And so they are going to be motivated to pick certain things out of our basket to help us make progress. Rather, in a holy friendship, the sacred space between the two people is such that the person who is emptying their things into the basket gets to be the one who chooses at what rate and at what things they want to work on at what time.
This is one of the most difficult barriers I have in friendships, is because my initial reaction is I want to offer advice or I want to offer solutions. Am I right?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Missy and she's over there nodding her head furiously. And to just set, one of the things I really appreciated about that particular example was, and I've said this before, I just got to say it to myself and listen, the importance of presence. That sometimes you just don't have to say a word, but your presence and your willingness to hold that basket can speak greater volumes than anything you could ever say.
I think another important takeaway from that might be also holding, like you said, holding that for your friend for a little bit without taking it on. I think you even mentioned that a moment ago. That would be my weakness, is taking it on and like bearing the weight of that internally instead of just realizing I'm holding this, safely for you until you tell me what you want my help with or whatever, and not internalizing somebody else's stress or event or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It can be so hard. I had a friend who went through something really challenging and painful a couple of months ago. And yeah, just like you, I wanted to go in there, and fix it and ruffle up some folks that hadn't been nice to my friend and whatever it was. I wanted to make my friend's life better because I love them and I didn't want to see them hurting. And yet if I had done that, they wouldn't have had the ability to work through what those issues were on their own, which means they probably would have come up somewhere down the line, which means I wouldn't have been being the kind of friend I really needed to be. And so my job at that point was to show up, talk when they wanted to talk, drink coffee when they wanted to drink coffee, go for a walk when they wanted to go for a walk, and let them figure it out at their own pace. And that can be some of the hardest work of a holy friendship.
Well, Victoria, before we ask you a final question, I got one last question, because in the title, the book is specifically mentions nurturing relationships that sustain pastors and leaders. But reading through the material, I mean, this is really a book for a lot of people that are seeking these meaningful and deep relationships, and as you define them, holy relationships. I don't want our listeners to think that this is just for pastors and clergy. While it is written in that context, there's so much to glean for the layperson or the individual who wants to know and to be able to discover these relationships in their lives.
Yes, and that was important to me as well, because while I am married to a pastor and I'm an ordained minister, I serve in a very different kind of pastoral role. And so while I was writing this book, I stayed in close conversation with a friend who is a seminary president, one who is a college president, folks who are working for nonprofits or are program coordinators for organizations, teachers. It was important to me that this speak for pastors, for ministers of all kinds, those who are feeling led to Christian leadership, and especially for those who are looking towards going into Christian leadership. I remember being taught in seminary that I needed to make sure that I always had a window in my door as a pastor to make sure that, everything was above reproach. And I needed to make sure that, I was never in a compromising position, God forbid, go to lunch with a man, something like that. Right. And so I think that we've gotten past a lot of that today. However, there are still a lot of young seminarians out there who have come to me and said, how do we do this? Especially those who are in like an appointment system, who know they're going to be moving every 3 years. How do you put down roots in a relationship like that? Or if you know that someday your friend might be your bishop and making decisions about your vocation, how do you have those kinds of relationships? And so I do believe that this is an important topic, not just for pastors, but for all Christian leaders.
Well, Reverend Dr. Victoria White, thank you so much for being our guest this week on Good Faith Weekly. Her new book, Holy Friendships, Nurturing Relationships That Sustain Pastors and Leaders, will be available next Tuesday, March 14th on Pie Day. So as you're eating a slice of pie, you can have this book and read its wisdom. It is absolutely wonderful. So before we let you go, Missy's got one last question she wants to ask.
Wasn't sure you were going to let me get that.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're
Victoria,
kicking me under the table here.
As you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." In light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I remember a young leader coming to me one time and saying, I love what you're saying about holy friendships, and I think it's super important. However, I don't feel like I can spend a lot of time like going out to lunch or having coffee with a holy friend during the week because, I'm a low person on the totem pole. I'm afraid that if there are cuts in my job, that I might be the next person on the line. And so I don't feel like I can put things like that on my calendar. And my heart broke for them because the way I see it, whatever that young leader needs to do her work well, whether it's, come up with a new newsletter article or craft a new idea for a course or whatever her work is, whatever makes that better, if that is having lunch with a holy friend or going for a walk with a holy friend, that is the work that she is being paid to do. Whatever makes her work flourish, that is what her work to do is. And so I'd really like to have a conversation with her boss, is the person I'd actually like to talk to. But all that is to say that holy friendships are not a luxury item. Holy friendships are a necessity to our sustainability and flourishing.
Well said.
Well said. Victoria, thank you so much. We appreciate you being a guest this week, and we wish you the very best. And again, congratulations on the new book. It's going to be out
Thanks so
next
much.
Tuesday.
This is a joy. Thank you. It was great.
Missy, I don't know about you, but this conversation was very personal for me because, for over 2 decades, I was in ministry, and the book is written for specifically pastors and leaders and the difficulty they have cultivating very deep and meaningful friendships throughout their career. And so what Reverend Dr. White was talking about really spoke to me in many different ways, because this is something that we haven't struggled with because we've had a lot of great friendships over 2 decades of ministry. But it's been somewhat of an adventure.
I mean, I would say there's been struggle. And let me kind of clarify a point that you just made. The book is written, for pastors and leaders, but I mean, it's applicable to anyone.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Anyone.
Sure.
It's kind of geared towards that audience and looks deeply into those kind of intentional friendships that you need. And, I would say for us, having been in the position of, pastor's wife and family, that it's been tricky. It's challenging in that spot to allow yourself to be vulnerable to people like within your sphere, within your congregation, to form those types of friendships. So I don't know that we always got it right, and I think there were times that we have been hurt.
I can remember, and in fact, I think we were dating at the time. I took a seminary class about pastoral ministry, and I remember the professor very specifically telling students that they should not have meaningful relationships with congregants. And I thought that was just really nonsense at the time. Now, after 20-something years of doing this, I understand now what the professor was attempting to say. But at the same time, if you live your life in any profession with those kind of barriers up, that's got to be maddening.
I understand what he's saying, and I understand why, because we've had some consequences of that. But I also just know that personality-wise, that's hard for me. As people who have listened to this podcast since I've started back last August would know, I just have a tendency to maybe overshare or say, I don't build up that wall very easily. And so that's what has been difficult, because you and I, especially when you're raising kids and you make family friends, and we did develop some very good friendships within our church, some very, holy friendships. But the flip side of that is it's a profession where your friend is always going to feel empowered to come knock on your office door and criticize your work product and criticize your job performance. And that was when it would get, in fact, just today, I ran into someone who was relaying a conversation that they had with someone else who was just raving about you as a pastor and saying wonderful things about you and how they, missed having you in the pulpit and things like that. And I was so touched by that. But at the same time, it's also...
You set them straight.
Right. But there are also those people who say those things, but at the same time were some of your harshest critics. And so that's what's so difficult is...
Well, let's do this, because I think you brought up an excellent point for us to talk about. So there's a lot of good things that we can talk about with the friendships that we've developed, and their meaning for us and how they've really sustained us through 20 years of ministry. But let's go back talking about raising kids, being married within the context of congregational life, because a lot of people refer to that as living within a fishbowl. Yes. Because you're constantly being evaluated. You're being, I'm constantly being evaluated as a pastor, as a preacher, as a minister, as an educator. You and I are constantly being evaluated as husband and wife, parents to our kids. Our kids are always being evaluated. What was probably the most difficult part of living in a fishbowl for you in ministry?
I have to say that I feel like we had it very good in comparison to what a lot of people experience in this situation. We had wonderful congregations. I know that one of your early mentors, before we were married, his wife pulled me aside and she said, "Listen, I will tell you one thing." She said, "You define the role. Don't let the role define you."
Wise
and
words.
That was the best thing she could have told me, because at that point in my life, I was young and didn't know any different than to slide into what I thought was what I was supposed to be. And her saying that to me was so very important, because then I was able to the best of my ability, be myself, which got me in trouble because I do tend to say things. I'm a foot and mouth kind of person.
I think you can get a prescription for that, but go ahead.
But I forget what your question was. I'm sorry.
Well, just about living in a fishbowl. And
I didn't feel like that.
Well, I think
too terribly bad.
Early on in our marriage, I mean, when we were much younger, I think both of us felt the pressure.
Yes.
And then it began to get a little bit easier as we grew older, as the kids grew older. But I'll never forget a story that another professor told me at seminary. It was about a time when he was living in a parsonage. And for anyone who is younger than 40 years old, that is a home that the church owns and lets the minister and their family live there. So he was living in a parsonage with his family, and one of his children broke a window. And one of the old crotchety deacons came up and started scolding the kid and asked the dad and pastor, well, what are you going to do about this?
No.
Yeah. And so the pastor just kind of looked down, found a rock, picked it up, and threw it through the other window.
Yeah. I think that's amazing.
And it's just like that. That story stuck with me of, we're always going to be judged, ministers especially. Mm-hmm. I hate the adage, and I got this told to me all the time, that we are held to a higher standard. I call BS on that. And because we're human, we have human relationships, we're parents, we're just like everybody else. We have a calling, we have an education, but we are people. And I think we grasped that pretty early on.
Also, we had perfect children. That helped.
Have you met our kids? There's a lot of stories we could tell.
Well, we'll get to those.
But, it's difficult to live in that fishbowl. It's difficult to maintain those relationships because, as you said, it's such a unique profession, ministry, because not only are you the expert in the room most of the time, but you're in a room filled with people who are, using secular terms, are your customers, mm-hmm. are your employees, mm-hmm. and in the Baptist context, at least, they're your boss. And that is a formula for disaster at times.
You add friendship in with that, and it does get messy sometimes. And I do think overall, you and I have been so #blessed to encounter some of the best and people who, as much as they're able and aware, walk that line very well and were supportive and took care of us. But then it just inevitably that one thing or that one situation where someone who we considered a good friend would maybe come to you and just kind of berate or say, it's hurtful. It's hard. So I'm going to speak now on the other side of this to any of you who are in a congregational life, who are members, to remember this about your pastor and about their family, is that it's really adds an additional layer of vulnerability and potential for hurt when they do call you friend. Mm-hmm. And then it's a profession where, like you said, they're your customers and your boss and your clients or whatever, your employees, but they also feel empowered to come in and criticize the way you do your job. Mm-hmm. And I think there are times when that's called for and warranted, but just to be gentle and be aware of how you handle those situations, knowing that for somebody who's in a pastoral role,
right. it very few times have I walked into somebody's place of employment and criticized how they're working.
I think that's it. We have friends who do things like we were talking when we were unpacking this earlier. We have a friend who is an electrician who we adore, mm-hmm. and we were like, well, we call on him, and he's got to dread seeing our phone numbers pop up because he thinks we're going to ask him to help with an electrical problem.
He doesn't.
A lot of times it's
he doesn't
true.
fear my phone calls, but your phone calls.
My phone calls, because I'm like, Mitch is trying to fix something. Quick,
get over here, quick.
And so I was thinking, well, we kind of we utilize our friends and their expertise for sure. But I would never go to his place of work and criticize the job that he's doing. Right. And I think that therein lies the difference, is when you're in this type of role. And I'm sure there's other types of roles where you could say this, but it's where people feel empowered to come in and be critical of the work that you're doing. And I don't know. And
with
maybe
that
we're
said,
going off on a rabbit trail.
No. With that said, there's a lot of struggles and difficulties in the relationship between clergy and their members. But there's also a lot of positives. I mean, think about the incredible people that we have met over the 2 decades of doing this, and just some of the remarkable acts of kindness and generosity that we have received. I think about when we were young ministers in Dallas-Fort Worth, and Jim Penny would walk up to me after service and slip $100 bill in my pocket. I mean, just stuff like that. And I also think when we came here to Norman, there's a great story you got to tell. The first week we're here in Norman, we're living in a hotel waiting to close on our house. And this dear, beautiful woman.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I know we may go a little long.
You got to hear the story, folks. You got to hear the story.
But the whole entirety of the 2 weeks we were in this hotel are what make this story even better. But we were supposed to be in this hotel for a few nights. The closing was delayed on our house because that's just what happens when you're waiting on paperwork. And so one of our dear members knew that we were in a hotel, which of course means I can't cook. So the boys are surviving on McDonald's, and I survived, I'm not kidding you, on Reese's peanut butter cups. That's like all I ate for that 2 weeks. But she one night made and brought us a stew, like a
crock pot.
Beef stew.
Yeah, like crock
pot full of beef stew.
Which was
it was
wonderful,
so good, but it was more than we could eat over a few days. We'd eaten it for several meals in a row, and then it was at that point where you don't want any more beef stew, and we still had it left. Well, we only had a teeny tiny that was what it was. We only had a teeny tiny refrigerator, so we didn't have a way to store the leftovers.
No.
So we couldn't leave it in the room. And this period of time in Oklahoma, there was snow. It was snowing every day. It was freezing cold. The dumpster was like, half a mile away. And so we were like, what are we going to do with the stew? Because it's going to start smelling. And so you looked at me, I looked at you, we both looked at the beef stew, and we were like, those are small enough chunks
to go down the toilet. So off to the toilet, you and I go.
We flushed the beef stew down the toilet. We're like,
well,
bigger things have
we
passed.
tried to flush the toilet.
We did, and it worked okay. But in a couple of days later, we did have a clogged toilet. Thankfully, we had adjoining rooms, and we had another toilet to use. So we just stopped using one toilet, used the other toilet. Well, funnily enough, our boys both got deathly ill during this time. We're vomiting and had, diarrhea and all the other stuff. So we ended up having a second toilet. Not only clogged, but they were fighting for that toilet because, again, they're both. Anyways, this is not.
And in the midst of it,
not
it is
pleasant story.
No. And in the midst of it, it is dead of winter. It is dry as bones outside. And our oldest son,
he nosebleeds so bad. He would hemorrhage out his nose. So, of course, this is one of the. Back in the day where this was a fairly new thing for hotels to have all white bedding. I mean, now that's pretty common, but back then it, was new. So, of course, this is one hotel that has everything is white.
Because it was an Oklahoma Sooners.
Yes. So I'm not kidding you. He bled all over every piece of bedding, and I was just mortified. So then I had to go to the front desk, who knew us quite well at the end of, 2 weeks. And I was like, listen,
if you walk in the door, a murder has not taken place.
And also, can I borrow a plunger?
But the point of that story is the sweet woman who brought the stew.
People have taken care of us in the very best of ways during the very worst of times. We are so super thankful. I will just mention to people, like I said, who are in church, just be mindful, be a good friend. I do think, and I think I alluded to in the interview, what I do envy about people who are going into pastoral roles in this day and age is that you are able to connect with people in your profession, friends, over social media and stay in contact. I felt like we were so isolated early on. Not that we didn't have friends, but we didn't know anybody that could relate to our specific circumstances.
Right.
We didn't, have other pastors who were starting out that you could kind of like commiserate with and get advice from. And I do envy people now who have that, who are able to kind of keep those relationships and encourage one another. I think that's so super helpful.
Absolutely.
Those are definitely your holy friendships.
Absolutely. Well, count your blessings. Say your appreciation to your friend. Tell them you love them, you care for them. Do something nice for them this weekend. That would be a great gesture. And so
take them a beef stew.
Take a beef stew. Just make certain they have a way to get rid of it.
And blender.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this week. To all of our female listeners out there, happy International Women's Week, as well as
it's International Women's Day, but Women's History Month.
I keep getting that wrong. Thank you for correcting me.
If I'm wrong, somebody let me know, but I looked it up before we came on, and I think that's the way it goes. So
We
happy
appreciate-
Women's History Month.
Absolutely. Appreciate everyone. Have a good week. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.